The stage came into Kettle Fork a little after noon on a Thursday, trailing a column of red dust that hung over the roofs a while and then settled back into the street as though it had never been lifted at all. And Amos Cleave looked at the woman who climbed down out of it and said, loud enough for the whole street, that she was older than the tintype. He did not say it kindly. He did not take her aside. He said it in front of the driver, who was still unhooking the team, and in front of 11 people who had come up from the store and the land office to watch the coach come in, because in a town that size the coach was still an event. Susannah Kerr stood in the dirt with her hand still out. She left it out 2 full seconds. She had counted them without meaning to. Then she lowered it. "I am 32, she said. That was in the letter. The picture looked younger. Pictures often do. He looked her over the way a man looks over a horse he has already decided against, and she let him. Because there was nothing else to be done in the middle of a street with 11 people watching and her trunk still up in the rack. She had prepared herself for the possibility that the reality of her would not match whatever Amos Cleave had built in his head over 5 months of letters. She had not prepared herself for him to do the arithmetic out loud. "I am going to be straight with you," he said. "I would appreciate that." He was a big man, heavy through the chest, with a good hat and a way of standing that took up more room than he needed. 2 men stood with him. One of them, younger and shorter and built differently, half a step back and to Amos's left, had not said anything at all, but his jaw had gone tight. "I do not think this is going to work," Amos said. Somewhere behind her a woman made a small sound. "I see," Susannah said. "It is nothing personal." "It feels somewhat personal, Mr. Cleave." He had the grace to look briefly uncomfortable. It did not change how he was standing. "I sent for a woman who could keep a house and carry her end of a working outfit," he said. "I have been thinking on it a week." He paused. "You do not look like you have done much of either." Susannah Kerr had, in the 4 years behind her, kept the books and the timber orders for a sash and blind works in Dubuque, buried a mother over 18 months of wasting, buried a father in 1 afternoon, settled a debt with a bank that had every intention of taking the shop, and then sold the shop herself for 11% more than the bank's man had said it was worth, because she had known what was in the yard and he had not. She had hands that had been in a joiner's shop since she was 9. She had a back that had never once given her trouble. She said none of that on that street. What she said was, "I came 1,100 miles, Mr. Cleave. I know it. I am sorry for the inconvenience. The stage back to Cutbank goes Saturday. I will cover the fare and the room until then. Mrs. Pruitt lets rooms over the store." He turned as though the thing were finished. Amos, it was the younger one. He had not moved. He said the one word and nothing after it, and something in the way he said it made Amos stop. "Stay out of it, Abel. I am not in it," Abel Cleave said. "I said your name. Do not. I have not said anything yet. I know what you are thinking. Then you know it is not nothing." Abel Cleave turned and looked at her, not the sweep his brother had done. Something more direct than that. The look of a man trying to see a person instead of an arrangement. He was shorter than Amos and wider through the shoulders, bareheaded, with dark hair long enough to touch his collar and a full dark beard and a white seam of old scar along the left side of his jaw that ran up into it. "Miss Kerr," he said, "I apologize for the manner of it." "You have nothing to apologize for. It is not your situation." "No," he agreed, "it is not." The crowd had not gone anywhere. The driver was making a considerable business of checking a strap he had already checked. "I would like to ask you something," Abel said. She waited. "Are you in a hurry to get back on that coach?" She looked at him carefully. "I have nowhere to get back to," she said, and it came out more honestly than she had intended it to. "Then before you decide anything, would you take a meal with me and have a conversation?" Nothing owed either way. Amos made a sound that was not a word. "I am buying," Abel said without looking at his brother. Come or do not. Amos, Susannah looked at him a moment longer. He was not a handsome man. His face was too angular and too weathered for his years, and there was that scar, and there was something in his expression that was not performing anything at all. All right, she said. A conversation. Mrs. Pruitt's counter served 3 things, and that Thursday they were beef and beans, cornbread and coffee, and served them without ceremony and well. Amos did not come. Abel set his hat on the bench beside him, which was the only time she saw him wear one that year, and looked at his plate a while before he looked up. How long was the road, he said. 6 days from Cutbank. 9 from Dubuque, where I started. You planned it careful. I plan most things careful. It did not do me a great deal of good this morning. Something moved at the corner of his mouth and did not become anything. I want to ask you a thing, and I want the true answer even if you think it is not the one I want. That is my general practice. Why did you answer the advertisement? She looked at him steady. Most people ask that expecting something tender. I am not expecting anything. I am asking because I would like to understand. She set down her cup. My father died 4 years ago and my mother the winter before that. I had a trade I had been raised in that does not have a great deal of use for a woman of my age in a river town. She said it the way she might have read out a column of figures. I answered the advertisement because out here what a person can do counts for more than what she looks like or who her father was. That was the reckoning. He was quiet a moment. Amos's advertisement said a working outfit that wanted a capable partner. It did. Those were near his words. He meant them when he wrote them, Abel said. He turned his cup a quarter turn. Amos has a picture in his head of the way a thing is supposed to go. When it comes out different, he does not always handle the difference well. That is a generous reading. He is my brother. Does that require generosity? Abel looked at her with that direct, considering quality again. Miss Kerr, I am going to say a thing, and I would like you to sit with it before you answer. She waited. My place is separate from his, he said. We share a fence line and a creek, and that is the whole of it. It is in worse shape than I would care to admit out loud. I have run it alone 6 years, and I have kept it alive, and I have not made it thrive. He paused. I am a better hand with timber than I am with anything else, and the house wants work and the barn wants more, and this winter is going to come in hard, and I may lose stock I cannot afford to lose. He stopped. I am telling you the bad parts first. I appreciate that. I am also telling you I would not insult you on a public street, he said, and that when I make an arrangement with a person I keep it. The counter had gone nearly empty. Mrs. Pruitt was washing something in the back with a steady splashing sound. What arrangement are you proposing? Susannah said. An honest one, not a tender one. He looked at her. A marriage in the legal sense, because out here there is no other arrangement that makes sense. And without either of us pretending it is a thing it is not. You need a place where what you can do counts. I need somebody who sees what I cannot see. If it turns into something else that would be. He stopped himself. I am not making a promise I cannot keep. She looked at him for a long moment. The thing she did not say, the thing she had not offered Amos because he had not earned it, was that she had been afraid on that coach, not of the road or the passes, afraid that she would come 1,100 miles and find nothing at the end of it, and that the nothing would confirm what the last 4 years had been quietly suggesting to her, which was that she had run out of road. She was still afraid of it, but she was sitting across from a man who had told her every hard thing about his situation before she had asked for one of them, and who had not once looked past her shoulder to see whether something better was coming. I have conditions, she said. Name them. I want to walk your place before anything is decided. Not the house. The buildings. All of them. Fair. I want a room that is mine, not much of one. For a reasonable while, until we both know whether this is going to work. He nodded without hesitating. And if it does not work, she said, I want it in writing that you cover my passage to somewhere I choose. Not back to Dubuque. Somewhere in writing, he agreed. Artis can draw it at the land office in the morning. She picked up her coffee. It had cooled enough to drink. She looked out the small window at the slice of mountain showing above the roofline. Snow sitting up there like it had been there since the beginning of things and intended to outlast everybody in the room. All right, Mr. Cleve, she said. Show me your buildings. Slate Hollow sat 5 miles east of Kettle Fork, at the end of a rutted track that wound through scrub pine and then opened out onto a broad, cold basin with a creek running the length of it and a long, dark ridge closing the north side. The house was not handsome. It was square and thick-beamed with a stone chimney built like it was expecting a war. And she could see the soundness of it from 50 yards out. And she could also see that the porch had gone down 2 inches on the left and that an upper shutter was hanging off a hinge that had been tolerated for at least 2 seasons. It wants work, Abel said beside her. He said it the way a man says a thing he already knows and has no interest in pretending about. Yes, she agreed. She did not go in the house. She walked the yard first, and he came with her and did not ask why, which she noticed. She went to the corner of the porch and got down on her heels and looked at the post base and the sill where they met, and put 2 fingers against the wood and pressed, and then took out a small folding knife and put the point of it into the sill at a slight angle and drew it out and looked at what came with it. The porch post is not the problem, she said. The sill under it took water for a couple of seasons before whoever built it got the grade right. It is punky about 4 inches in on this end. You will want to sister it before you jack the post, or you will just push the post through the sill and be worse off. Abel Cleve did not say anything. She went to the barn. She stood inside it a while looking up and walked to the middle. And looked up some more, and put her hand flat against the center post and left it there. This is a good barn, she said. He was in the doorway. It was my father's. I can tell. Nothing in here is doing a job it was not cut for. She came out and looked north across the creek at a long new building with pale timber still bright at the ends where it had been sawn, and a roof of shakes so new they had not gone gray. What is that one? She said. Amos's hay barn. He put it up in the spring, 80 feet. He runs the shipping supper out of it in the fall and the winter gathering after Christmas, and the whole valley comes. She looked at it a long time. May I walk it? We would have to ask him. Then I will ask him, she said. They were married 11 days later by the circuit judge in the front room of the land office, with the notary Artis as one witness and a woman named Hattie Pruitt from the store as the other, and it took under 10 minutes, and Susannah read every line of the agreement before she put her name to it, and Artis watched her do it with the expression of a man who had rarely seen that happen and was not certain how he felt about it. Amos did not come. The early days were not graceful. They moved around each other with the careful politeness of 2 people sharing a space neither of them was certain how to share. He was up before 4:30 and outside before she came down. She took the kitchen without discussion, and he stayed out of it without discussion. They ate breakfast in a silence that was not unfriendly and was not comfortable either, the silence of 2 strangers making a reasonable effort. She found her feet faster than she expected. On the 4th morning, she walked every building on the place with a notebook and came back with 9 pages. The barn was sound. The house was sound in the frame and failing at the edges, which she wrote down that way, failing at the edges, because it was accurate. The lean-to on the west side of the barn had been added by somebody who had not thought about where the water would go. The corral rails were fine, the chicken house was past saving, and she said so. She put the notes on the table at breakfast. Abel read through them without speaking for a long while. "You walked all of it this morning," he said. "Yes. That is most of a mile with the far shed. I have good boots." He looked up. "The lean-to. I have been meaning." "You have been meaning for 3 years by the look of the rot at the base of the outside post," she said. "It is not urgent. It is on the list under the sill." He read the rest. "You have done this before." "My father was a millwright," she said. That was the first fact about herself she had volunteered, and she watched him receive it and file it and not ask, which she had not expected and which sat with her the rest of the morning. Otis Bly rode over on the second week and stayed for supper, which appeared to be an arrangement that had been running for years and that nobody had thought to mention to her. He was somewhere past 60, dried down to gristle, with a white beard cropped close, and a manner so unhurried it was almost restful, and he came with his granddaughter Della, who was 8, and who had been sent to live with him after her mother died, and who had the watchful stillness of a child who has learned that grown people's plans change without warning. Della came into the kitchen, looked at Susannah for a while from the doorway, and then came in and sat on the wood box and said nothing for 40 minutes. On the third visit she said, "What is that thing on the string?" Susannah looked at what the child was looking at. It was hanging on a nail beside the door where she had put it the first week. A smooth pear-shaped weight of brass about the size of a small pear, gone dark with handling, on a length of waxed linen line with a little leather pouch beside it. "That is a plumb bob," Susannah said. "What does it do?" "It tells you what straight up and down is." Della thought about that. "Everybody knows what straight up and down is." "No," Susannah said. "Everybody thinks they do. That is a different thing." She took it down and hung it from the top of the kitchen door casing and let it swing and go still, and the line came to rest a good half-inch off the casing at the bottom, and Della looked at the gap and then at the door and then at the gap again, with the expression of a child who has just found out that a thing she trusted has been lying to her the whole time. "The door is crooked," Della said. "The door is fine. The frame moved. She wound the line. Everything moves. That is not the trouble. The trouble is that a person will look at a thing every day for 6 years and never once find out which way it has gone." Della asked to hold it. Susannah let her. The child took the weight of it in both hands and was surprised by it. The way everybody was surprised by it the first time, because brass is heavier than it looks. Otis Bly watched all of this from the table and did not say anything about it until they were putting the horses to the wagon in the dark, when he said to Abel, not quietly enough, "She know what she is about." "She does," Abel said. They fixed the porch on a Saturday in the third week, starting at first light while it was still cold enough to see breath. She had been right about the sill. He got the punky section out with a chisel, and she cut and fit the sister piece because she was faster at it than he was, which he noticed, and then they set the jack and he held the tension on the structure while she drove the new post home and set the shims. It was hard, awkward work of the kind where instructions do not help much, and both people have to feel the give of a heavy thing and trust the other one to hold when they say hold. She was stronger than she looked. She knew when to brace and when to ease. When the beam made a sound that suggested it was thinking about more movement than either of them wanted, she did not flinch. She just held and said, "I have it, keep going." When it was done, he stood back and looked at it. The porch sat level for the first time in what he admitted was probably 2 seasons. "The barn roof before the snow," he said. "I know. I have been thinking about the order. Barn roof first. That is the structure that protects your equipment. Then the west storm shutters. Then the lean-to. And the lean-to is a spring job, because you are going to want to move the water and you cannot dig it now. How long have you had that order?" "Since the 4th day," she said. He made a sound she thought was probably a laugh, though it was too short and too quiet to be sure of. She walked Amos's hay barn in the first week of October. He had not exactly given her permission. What he had done, when she asked him at the store with Hattie Pruitt standing right there, was look at her for a beat too long, and then say that she was welcome to look at anything she liked. In the tone of a man being generous with something that cost him nothing. She went on a Tuesday with Abel. It was 80 feet long and 36 wide and open to the roof, and it was the biggest room in that end of the county, and she understood within 4 minutes why the whole valley came to it. It felt like a church that somebody had built for hay. She stood in the middle of it and looked up for a long time. Then she took the plumb bob out of its pouch and hung it against the center post, the big one that carried the middle of the ridge, and let it swing and go still, and got down on her heels and looked at where the line came to rest against the base. Abel came over. "What, 3/4 of an inch," she said. "Out of plumb. Out of plumb at the base. That is not by itself a thing to lose sleep over. A post can go 3/4 and stand 100 years. Then why are you making that face?" She stood up and put her hand on the post and ran it along the grain. "This is green," she said. "Not seasoned. It was standing timber last winter, and it was in this building by June." She moved to the nearest wall post and did the same. "This one too." She looked up at the ridge. "The whole frame is green, which is not a crime. Plenty of good buildings go up green. But green timber shrinks as it cures, and it does not shrink evenly, and when it shrinks it moves whatever is joined to it." She pointed up. "Those braces at the ridge. They are lapped and pinned, and they are carrying the middle of an 80-foot roof, and the timber they are pinned into is going to keep moving for 2 more years. So it will move. It will move," she said. "What I would want to know is which way and how fast." She wound the line and put it in the pouch. "I want to write down where it is today," she said. "Then I want to come back and write it down again." She wrote it down that afternoon in the back of her notebook. 3/4, base of center post, leaning south. The date. The weather. She wrote it the way her father had written things, which was to say she wrote what she saw and not what she thought about it, because the thinking part could come later and the seeing part could not be recovered once it was gone. She told Amos 2 days later. She did it carefully. She rode over with Abel on a Thursday when Amos was setting a gate, and she waited until the gate was set. And then she said that she had walked his barn and that she wanted to tell him what she had found and that she was not telling him in order to be right about it. Amos listened to the whole thing with his arms folded. "Green timber cures," he said. "Yes, that is what it does. It cures and it settles and it tightens up, and then it is stronger than it was. My father built the old barn out of green timber, and it is standing yet. Your father's barn is 40 feet, she said, not 80, and it is framed with queen posts, and yours is not." Amos looked at Abel. Abel said nothing. "You have been here a month," Amos said to her, not unkindly, which somehow made it worse. "I built that barn with 11 men over 6 weeks, and I paid for every stick of it out of my own account, and there is not one thing in it I did not lay a hand on. I believe that. Then what am I supposed to do with 3/4 of an inch and a piece of string?" "Nothing today," she said. "I am asking you to let me measure it again in January." Amos Cleave laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, and that was almost the worst of it, because a cruel laugh she could have used. "Measure whatever you want," he said, and picked up his maul and went back to work. She told Abel about her father that night. She had not planned to. It came up because he asked her, in the sideways way he asked things, why she had not argued harder. And she said that arguing harder with a man like Amos moved him backward and not forward, and he said, "You have thought about this a good deal," and she said, "Yes," and then she sat down and told him. His name was Tobias Kerr, she said. He was a millwright. He built and set the machinery in grist mills and saw mills from Dubuque south along the river for 26 years, and he was very good. And he was not a man anybody would have called warm. Abel put down the harness he had been mending. In '82, he was setting a new run of stones on the second floor of a mill at Bellevue, she said. The stones and the housing and the shafting come to a considerable weight, and he told the owner that the second floor girder under that bay wanted a post under it carried down to the ground, because the girder was long and it was carrying a distributed load that was about to become a point load. The owner said the girder had held 10 years. My father said it had held 10 years of grain sacks, which lie down flat and do not turn at 90 revolutions. The stove ticked. The owner overruled him, she said. He was inside his rights. It was his mill. My father wrote the objection in his daybook, which is what a millwright does, and he signed it and dated it, and then he went on and set the stones because that was the work he had contracted for. He set them in October. The floor went in March. Abel did not say anything. He was underneath it, she said. He had gone down to the shaft alley to look at a coupling. Him and a boy of 17 named Rule who swept for them. Neither one of them got out. She turned the cup in her hands. She had not noticed she had picked it up. I was 19, she said. I read the daybook 2 weeks after. It was in his kit with his tools. The objection was on the 4th page from the back in his hand, signed and dated, 5 months before the floor came down. She stopped. Nobody ever did anything about it, she said. There was no law that made anybody do anything about it. The owner rebuilt in '83 and put a post under the girder, and it is standing yet. Abel sat with that a long moment. The plumb bob, he said. It was his. It was in the kit. She looked at the door where it hung on its nail. Everything else in that kit I sold in '84 when the shop went, the levels and the augers and the 2 good planes and the chest itself. I kept that. Why that one? She thought about it honestly, because he had asked honestly. Because it does not have an opinion, she said. A level can be sprung, a rule can be read wrong. A man can look at a wall and swear on his life it is straight. She looked at him. That thing hangs where the earth pulls it, and it does not care whose barn it is, or how much he paid for it, or how many men helped him raise it. It just tells you. Abel Cleve looked at the brass on the nail by the door for a long time. Then, he said, in January I will ride over there with you. She looked up. He will not like it, she said. No, he agreed. He will not. The first snow came in the 3rd week of November without any of the bluster that usually goes ahead of it, just settling in overnight and deeply, so that she woke to a world that had changed in the dark. She stood at the kitchen window with coffee and watched the basin fill up white. The ridge had gone into cloud. The pines held their snow with the patience of things that are used to bearing weight. She heard Abel come down and pause and then come and stand beside her at the glass. They looked at it a while. Early, he said. Yes, barn is secure. Stock is in the north pasture behind the windbreak. She nodded. She was not thinking about the stock. She was standing in this kitchen, in this basin, feeling the improbability of it. 1,100 miles from where she had started. 6 weeks from a street in Kettle Fork where a man had done arithmetic on her out loud, and the house was solid under her feet, and the porch outside held 2 people without complaint. Take the heavier coat, she said. The one at the back of the closet. He stopped and looked at her. The wind comes harder out of the east when there is snow on the ground, she said. Your regular coat is not going to be enough of a thing today. He went to the closet and found the coat and went out. By December they had a rhythm, and neither of them had discussed it. She was up at 5 and he was up before that and had learned not to stamp through the kitchen until she had the fire going. She had learned that he would not come in from the first check until she had set something on the table, so she waited for a shape at the window before she plated anything. These were not agreements made with words. They were the sort of accommodation that forms between two careful people who are paying attention. She burned a stew in the second week of December. She had been working out whether the feed grain order was going to come up short against the length of the cold, which it was, by about 2 weeks, and the stew went past simmer into something concentrated and unfortunate that filled the kitchen with smoke. She caught it before it was a danger. She did not catch it before it was ruined. She was standing at the stove looking at the pot and doing the arithmetic on what was left in the larder when Abel came in, took one look, and said nothing at all. He went to the larder. He came back with the heel of a smoked ham and the cold cornbread from the morning and set both on the table. "Sit down," he said, not unkindly. She sat. He poured coffee. They ate cold ham and cold cornbread in the lamplight, and after a minute she said, "The feed order has a problem." He looked at her over the cup. "We come up 2 weeks short in February unless we add to it." I was working the arithmetic, and the stew suffered for it. Yes, he thought a moment. Amos has excess grain off the summer cutting. She looked at him. "I would rather not run short in February," he said, "than be careful about who I buy from." She was quiet a moment. "All right," she said. "Let me have the exact quantity before you go, so he has nothing to be generous about." "Of course." She ate a piece of the cold cornbread. It was not as good as the warm kind. It was not without its own qualities. "I will make a proper supper tomorrow," she said. The cornbread was fine. That is a generous reading of cold cornbread. "It is an honest one," he said. She looked at him. He was eating it with complete sincerity, a man who meant what he had said about cold cornbread, and she thought, not for the first time, that this was a strange situation she had landed in, and that it was not, on balance, a bad one. He came off the ladder on a Wednesday in January. She registered the details later the way a person registers the ordinary facts that stand around an extraordinary thing. Wednesday, cold, but not the killing cold. He had been up finishing the northwest run of the barn roof that they had both agreed had to be closed before the deep snow, and he had been at it 2 hours. And she had been in the kitchen going through the supply accounts. It was not a loud sound. That was the part she remembered. Not a crash. A sharp crack, a brief second sound, and then nothing. The nothing was what got her out of the chair. She came around the barn and saw the ladder on the ground and Abel beside it. He was conscious. She confirmed that first, at a pace that felt like running and probably was. His eyes were open and he was making the controlled sound of a man managing pain rather than the sound of a man who does not know where he is. "Do not move," she said. "I am not," he said through his teeth. "Where? Shoulder. Left. A breath. Hip, same side." She looked at him without touching him yet. He was on his back. His left arm was at an angle that was wrong. His face had gone the color of old ash. "I am going to check your legs." She went over them with her hands, pressing along the length, watching his face. It tightened twice, at the left hip and lower on the left leg, but he did not lose his breath and he did not lose his focus, and when she asked him to move his feet, both moved. "Nothing in the spine," she said, with a certainty she did not entirely feel. "I have to get you inside, and I have to do it slow." "The doctor at Cutbank is 4 hours," he said. "I know it. Inside first." It was not graceful, and it was not quick, and there were 2 places where she had to stop and let him breathe before they could go on. By the time they reached the bed in the downstairs room, he was sweating through his shirt in a cold house. She got the shirt off and looked at the shoulder. It was out, not broken. The joint high and forward in a way a break does not produce. She had seen it put back once. She had been 11, and it had been a mill hand at Bellevue who had gone off a loading stage. and her father had done it himself in the yard with an economy of movement that had shocked her at the time, and she had watched every part of it because she was that kind of child. "The shoulder is out," she said. "Not broken." He absorbed that. "You know what to do with it." "I watched it done once." A pause. "Once I am sure of what I saw." He looked at the ceiling. "All right," he said. "It is going to hurt." "I know what it feels like coming out," he said. "Do it." She set herself the way her father had set himself. She got the arm to the angle and put on slow, steady traction instead of the violent pull she had half remembered and more than half feared, and felt the joint travel and then seat. And she felt it in her own hands. Abel made one sound that was not a word. "That is done," she said. She bound the arm with a strip off the linen chest and then went to the hip, which was bruised to the bone and coloring already, but the joint moved right under pressure, and he said the pain was impact and not the grinding kind. She worked at it a quarter of an hour, asking and watching, and told him what she thought, which was probably not broken and possibly a crack she could not confirm. She sent the Bly boy for the doctor within the hour. The doctor came the next afternoon and confirmed all of it and said, in the manner of a man giving credit that surprised him, that she had done good work on the shoulder. "I had a good model," she said. After he left, she stood in the doorway and looked at Abel in the bed. He looked wrong in it. Too still. Too horizontal. A man whose ordinary state was upright and moving. "The roof," he said. "I know. I cannot. I know. I will look at what is left." "Susannah," she waited. "The bracket that went," he said. "I checked it a fortnight back. It probably looked fine a fortnight back. I should have changed it anyway." She looked at him a long moment. He was not a man who dwelt on things, which meant that when he did, it counted. "You fell," she said. "That is what happened. The rest we handle. I have the list. I have had it since yesterday afternoon. The roof, the stock rotation, the water in the barn, the seed account at Cutbank that comes due in 3 weeks. She paused. "Let me do my work." He was quiet. "All right," he said. She had not been altogether sure she could manage it. The accounts she could do in her sleep. The scheduling and the supply questions were nothing. What she was not sure of was the physical part, the stock at the scale it needed, the daily dozen things Abel compressed into his hours before light with the efficiency of a man who had been at them for decades. She learned them, not elegantly and not fast, but with the same stubborn, systematic attention she brought to everything. The rotation she took out of his ranch journal, which was in a shorthand she decoded over 2 days. The water in the barn she solved with his coal and iron pot arrangement from the year before, and a change of her own that he improved on in the spring. The far fence she walked 7 times in 3 weeks in boots that were not right for that ground, and raised a blister on the 3rd day that she dressed with a strip of cloth and did not mention. Amos came on the 4th day. He had heard. Of course he had heard. He rode in looking like a man uncertain of his welcome and prepared to be useful anyway. She met him at the gate. "How bad?" "Shoulder and hip. The doctor has been. No break. 4 to 6 weeks before he is at full capacity." Amos's face went through several things. "What do you need?" She looked at him steadily. This was, she understood, a moment. She had options. She could be cool about it. She could make him offer twice. She could make it cost him something. She chose to need what she needed. "The roof," she said, "the northwest run. I can hand material and I can do the lower courses. The peak work wants somebody who has done it. I can do it. I know you can." He tied his horse. He came through the gate. He stopped and looked at her with an expression she had last seen on a street in front of 11 people, except that it had turned around and was pointing somewhere else now. "I have not got words that are enough," he said. "I know," she said. "Come fix the roof." They were 2 days at it. Amos did the peak. She did everything under it and drove nails in a way that Abel would have adjusted slightly and would not have been ashamed of, because she had spent 3 months watching him work and had not wasted the watching. They did not talk much while they worked. In the evenings, Amos sat with Abel in the downstairs room, and the two of them talked the way brothers talk when one of them has been frightened sideways, about the fence line and the stock and the coming spring, and about everything except the thing that had put Abel in the bed. Susannah brought coffee and did not stay, because there was other work and because some conversations want a different sort of room. She was in the kitchen one evening when she heard Abel laugh. She stopped. It was not a long laugh, and it was not a big one. It was real, the kind that happens when a thing is actually funny and not when a man has decided to perform being amused. She had not heard it before. It was lower than she expected and shorter, and it was gone almost at once, and it had been real. She went back to the accounts and found herself unable to concentrate for several minutes, which annoyed her. She measured the barn on the 14th of January. She went alone because Abel could not ride yet and because she did not want to make a party of it. She rode over in the middle of a clear, cold afternoon and let herself in at the big door and hung the plumb bob against the center post and got down on her heels in the dark of that enormous room and looked at the gap. 1.5 inches. She measured it 3 times because the first time she did not believe it. She had a folding rule out of her apron and she laid it against the line and against the post, and it was 1.5 inches and a little over, and it had been 3/4 in October. She sat back on her heels in the cold and made herself go slow. 3 months. Green frame. Doubling, that in itself was not proof of anything, because green timber does most of its moving in the first 2 years. And a post can go out 1.5 inches and stand. Then she got up and walked the length of the building looking at the ridge and at the pinned lap braces where they came into the ridge beam, and at the third bay from the north end she found what she had gone there half expecting to find and hoping she would not. The pin at the north face of that brace had drawn. Not much. It stood proud of the timber by about the thickness of 2 coins, which meant that the timber it was pinned into had shrunk and moved away from it, which meant the joint was not carrying what it had been cut to carry, which meant the load had gone somewhere else. She wrote all of it down. The date, the weather, the measurements, the bay number, the amount of draw on the pin. She wrote what she saw and not what she thought about it. Then she rode home and did not sleep well. She told Amos at the store, which she had not intended, but he was there when she came in with the list and there were 6 people in the room, and he asked her in front of all of them whether she had been out measuring his barn again. "I have," she said. "And what does the string say today?" She could have let it go. She thought about that afterward a good many times, whether she could have taken him outside, whether the whole of what came after turned on the fact that she answered him where she stood. 1.5 inches at the base of the center post, she said. It was 3/4 in October, and the north pin at the third brace has drawn about a 1/16. The room went quiet in the particular way a small store goes quiet. Amos set down what he was holding. "Do you know how many men helped me raise that building?" he said. 11 men. 6 weeks. And a woman comes out from Iowa in the fall and hangs a weight on a string and tells me my roof is coming down. "I have not said your roof is coming down," she said. "I have said the frame has moved 1.5 inches in 3 months and a pin has drawn, and that I would like to put 2 posts under the ridge at the 3rd and 6th bays before the wet snow, and that it is 2 days of work and about $9 of timber." $9. And 2 days. Amos looked around the room. Hattie Pruitt was behind her counter with a scoop in her hand and had not moved it in some while. "My father raised barns in this county for 30 years, Amos said. "I helped him from the time I could carry a bucket. I know what timber does." "So did mine," Susannah said. She did not say it loudly. That was what made it land. She said it the way you set a tool down on a bench. Amos's jaw worked once. "I am not putting posts in the middle of that floor," he said, "because a woman I have known 4 months does not like the look of a joint. You cannot get a wagon down the center with posts in it. It is a hay barn." "Then move them to the quarter points and I will redraw it," she said. "It is not as good, but it is a great deal better than nothing." The answer is no. "All right," she said. And that was the part that people in Kettle Fork talked about for a year afterward. That she said all right and picked up her list and finished her order and paid Hattie Pruitt and said good afternoon to the room and walked out. She did not argue, and she did not appeal to anybody, and she did not go to Abel to have him fight it for her. She wrote it down instead. The date. The refusal, what was said. She wrote it in the daybook the way her father had written the objection in his, and she signed it and dated it, and she did that not because she thought it would ever matter to anybody, but because it was the practice she had been raised in, and there was some comfort in the practice. The valley took sides, in the low way a valley does. Otis Bly said, to anyone who asked, and several who did not, that he had known Tobias Kerr's name before that woman ever came to this country, because millwrights are known, and that a man who would not spend $9 was welcome to his opinion. Others said the Cleve brothers had been getting along fine before, and it was a hard thing when a woman came in and set them against each other. And that was said in a good many kitchens, and it got back to her, because it always does. Abel did not raise his voice about it once. What he did was ride to Cutbank in the first week of February and come back with 2 lengths of fur 6 by 8, 12 feet, and put them under the tarp behind his own barn. She looked at them. "He will not take them," she said. "No," Abel said. "But I would rather have them and not need them." The snow that mattered started on a Wednesday in the 3rd week of February. It was not a blizzard. That was the thing she had not braced for. She had spent the winter watching for a blizzard, for wind and drift and the dramatic weather that a person can see coming 3 hours out. What came instead was a warm, wet snow out of the southwest that fell without any wind at all for 2 days and a night. The kind that goes on the roof and stays there, that packs down under its own weight and takes on water and does not blow off and does not slide. By Thursday evening there was better than 2 feet of it on every flat thing in that basin. And it was heavy enough that Abel went up on the house with a rake and pulled the north slope clear in the dark, working one-handed because the shoulder was still not right, and Susannah held the ladder and did not say anything about the shoulder. The winter gathering at Amos's barn had been set for Saturday since Christmas. It was the thing that Valley did. There was no church closer than Kettle Fork, and the town hall was 40 feet square, and the Cleve hay barn was the only room in that country that would hold everybody. And it had held everybody for 2 winters running. 40-odd people. Every outfit in the basin. Trestle tables down one side, a fiddle at the far end, the children in the loose hay at the north end where they could be kept an eye on. Susannah did not sleep Friday night. She got up at 4 and made coffee and sat at the table in the dark with her notebook open to the October page and the January page, and she did the only arithmetic she had, which was that snow of that kind runs to about 20 pounds the cubic foot when it has taken water, and that 36 feet by 80 feet of it at 2 feet deep is a number she wrote down and then looked at for a while. Abel came down at 4:30 and looked at the number over her shoulder and did not say anything for a moment. "That is a great deal of weight," he said. "That building was framed to carry snow," she said. "Every building in this basin is. It is not the weight by itself, it is the weight on a frame that has moved." "Yes," he stood there. "Say the rest of it," he said. She looked up at him. "I do not know," she said. "That is the rest of it. I have 1.5 inches and a drawn pin and 2 feet of wet snow, and any one of those 3 is nothing, and I do not know what all 3 of them are together, and neither does anybody else. And that is exactly the trouble." She closed the notebook. My father did not know either. He knew enough to say put a post under it. Abel Cleve went and got his coat. "We are going early," he said. They came into the yard at Amos's place a little after noon with the 2 lengths of fur in the wagon bed under a tarp, and Amos came out and saw the shape of them and knew what they were before anybody spoke. "No," he said. "Amos, the answer has been no since January, and it is no with 40 people coming." "They are coming in 3 hours," Susannah said. 2 posts at the quarter points. 3 hours is enough. I have the shoes cut already. They sit on the floor and they do not go through it, and we can pull them Monday if the weather turns. "In front of the whole valley," Amos said. 2 posts in the middle of my barn, and every man here watching me put them in. "That is what this is about," Abel said. It was the first hard thing she had heard him say to his brother. Amos turned on him. "What did you say?" "I said that is what this is about. Not the $9 and not the wagon room." He looked at Amos steadily. "It is that they would see it." Amos stood in the snow a long moment with his breath going up. Then he said, "You take her word over mine." "I take a measurement over an opinion," Abel said. "I would take it over my own." She went inside before it got any worse, because she had been in enough rooms to know that 2 brothers standing in a yard is not a thing a third person improves. She hung the plumb bob on the center post at 12:15. 3¼ inches. She did not believe it. She hung it again from a fresh point and let it settle, and it came to rest in the same place, and she got the folding rule against it, and it was 3¼ and better. 1.5 inches in January. 5 weeks. And then, kneeling there on the cold boards in that enormous empty room with the light coming in gray through the big door, she saw the thing that she carried for the rest of her life. The line was not still. It was not swinging. A plumb bob swings when you hang it, and then it settles and it stops, and this one had settled and stopped, and the brass at the end of it was moving. Not much. A hair. The kind of movement you cannot see if you are looking at the weight, and can only see if you look at the line against something behind it, and she was looking at the line against the base of the post. It was moving because the post was moving. She stayed on her knees about 4 seconds. Then she got up and went out into the yard where the 2 brothers were still standing 8 feet apart in the snow, and she said, in a voice she did not recognize as her own, because it was so level, "Amos, come and look at the string." And he did. That was the thing. For the rest of it, for all the years after, she never once let anybody in that county tell the story as though somebody had dragged Amos Cleve to it. He came because she asked him in that voice. He walked in ahead of her and got down on one knee on the boards in his good coat and put his head at the level of the base of that post and looked at the line for a long time. Then he stood up and went out and got on his horse. He met the first 3 wagons a half-mile down the road and turned them back. He sent the Bly boy east and Wexler's man west. He rode into Kettle Fork himself and stopped Hattie Pruitt's party in the street with his hat in his hand, and he did not tell one soul that it was his brother's wife who had found it, because there was not time, and because he was not thinking about himself for the first time in a good while. Nobody came to the winter gathering that year. The roof went at 20 minutes past 6 on Saturday evening. It did not go all at once. She was standing in Amos's yard with Abel and Otis Bly when the first sound came out of the building, a long, low complaint out of the middle of it that was not like anything she had heard before, and Otis said one word, and then the north 2/3 of the ridge came down and took the walls in with it. And the sound of 80 feet of green timber and 2 feet of wet snow arriving on a plank floor rolled out across that basin and came back off the ridge 4 seconds later. Then it was quiet, and there was snow dust hanging in the air over the wreck of it in the last of the light, and nobody in it. Della Bly would have been at the north end, in the loose hay, where the children went. Susannah Kerr got down on her heels in the snow of that yard and put her hands over her face and stayed that way about a minute and a half, which was the only time in 11 years in that country that anybody saw her do such a thing, and Abel stood beside her and did not touch her and did not tell her it was all right, because it was not, and because he was not a man who said things he did not mean even then. Then she got up and wiped her face with the back of her wrist and said, "We should get the horses in out of this." They dug the barn out over 3 weeks in March. There was a good deal of timber in it worth saving, and Amos saved what could be saved, and what could not be saved he stacked and did not burn. And in April he took a length of the 3rd bay brace down to Kettle Fork and set it on the counter at the store where every man in the basin would come past it, with the drawn pin still in it and the shrinkage plain in the joint, and he did not put a sign on it, and he did not need to. He rebuilt in June. 60 feet, not 80. Queen posts. Seasoned timber out of a yard at Cutbank at nearly twice what the green had cost him, and he paid it and said nothing about it to anybody. He came to supper at Slate Hollow the 2nd week of April, which he had not done since the wedding. He sat at the table a long while. Then he said, to the table more than to either of them, 41 people were on that road. Susannah did not say anything. "I have been trying to find a way to say a thing to you since February," Amos said, "and I have not found one, and I have decided that is because there is not one." He looked up at her. "So I am going to say the small part instead, and you can take the rest as understood." "All right," she said. "I was wrong on the street the day you came," he said. "And I was wrong in the store in January, and the second one was worse." She thought about that. The second one was worse. She agreed. Something went through his face that was not comfortable and did not try to be. The two of them were a long time getting anywhere after that. It was not resolved that April, and it was not resolved that year. What happened instead was that Amos Cleave started coming to supper the 2nd Sunday of every month and brought seed corn in the spring without a word about it, and asked her in July to walk the frame of the new barn before the roof went on, and stood behind her while she did it with his hat in his hands. She found 2 things. He fixed both of them. Word moved through that basin the way water moves through cracked ground, finding every channel there was. In April, a man named Wexler asked her to look at a granary he was putting up, and she looked at it and told him it was fine and to stop worrying about it, which he said afterward was worth more to him than if she had found something. In May, the Sondergaards asked her to walk a bridge sill on the creek crossing at the low end, and she walked it and told them it had 8 years in it, and to plan for the 9th. In June, a young man named Jory Cass, who had taken over a failing outfit east of Kettle Fork and could not afford to pay anybody for anything, rode over on a Sunday to ask about a rafter tail and stayed 4 hours. And she gave him the whole of it and would not take a coin, and Abel said nothing about that either way. She did not charge much, and she did not charge everybody. She kept a book of what she looked at and what she found, dated and signed, and she gave a copy of the page to whoever had asked her, and she told them all the same thing, which was to keep it, because a written thing outlives the man who remembers it. By the 2nd winter, there were 4 buildings in that basin with a post under a girder that had not had one before, and not one of them had needed it yet, and that was the whole point, and about half the county understood it. Abel said it in May, on the level porch, at the end of a day. He said it the way he said everything, which was without ornament and after having thought about it a good while. "I want to say what this is," he said. "I have not said it, and I have been meaning to since about January." She waited. "I told you at Hattie Pruitt's counter that I was making an arrangement and not a promise," he said. "That was honest at the time. It has not been honest since somewhere around the middle of the winter, and I have gone on saying nothing, which is its own kind of lie, and I would rather not." "Say it then." "I would have come for you in that street if he had never rejected you," he said. "I want you to know that. I read your letter." He asked me to look at the part about the timber order because he could not follow it. And I read the whole of it, and I knew before you ever got off that coach what kind of a mind had written it. He looked out at the basin. He did not know what he had. I did. And then he handed it to me in the street in front of 11 people, and I have never in my life been so ashamed of being glad about a thing. Susannah Kerr looked at him. You never said. I did not want you to stay because you were obliged, he said. Same reason I told you the bad parts first. She was quiet a moment. Out past the porch, the basin was going gold the way it did in the last hour, and the ridge was going dark ahead of it, and the new frame of Amos's barn stood up white and clean across the creek. I am going to tell you a thing now, she said, and I want you to hear the whole of it before you say anything. All right. I have been useful to people my whole life, she said. I was useful to my father, and I was useful to the shop, and I was useful to my mother for 18 months, and I was good at it, and not one of them ever once looked at what I was doing and asked me what I thought. She paused. You moved your chair around the table. I do not follow. In November, she said, when I laid out the order of the work, you got up and came around to my side so you could read it right side up instead of turning it toward you. She looked at him. Nobody had ever done that. It is a small thing. I have thought about it a great deal more than is reasonable. Abel Cleve did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, I am still not going to be tender about it. I know, she said. I have stopped minding. He hung the plumb bob himself in the fall, on the day they closed the new barn in. It was Amos who asked for it. He came over in September and stood in the kitchen and looked at the nail by the door where it had hung since her first week, and said that a thing like that ought to be where a man could reach it, and asked her whether she would let it go across the creek. She thought about it a long time. It was the last thing out of that kit. There was nothing else left of Tobias Kerr in the world but a name in a daybook that nobody had ever read but her. Then, she said, on one condition. It hangs where it can be taken down. Not in a case. Not on a shelf. If a man cannot reach it in his work clothes, it is a decoration, and it might as well be at the bottom of the creek. Amos drove the nail himself at the north end of the new barn, at the height of his own shoulder, where the light came in the door and fell on it. He did not make a speech. He drove the nail and hung the line on it and stood back and looked at it. And then he said, to nobody in particular, my father would have wanted one of these and never bought one. Della Bly, who was 9 that fall and who had held the hammer while he set the nail, said, you have to hang it and then wait. It does not tell you right away. Amos looked down at her. Who told you that? She did, Della said. He looked across the barn at Susannah, who was at the far end with Abel checking a brace and not listening, or appearing not to. Well, Amos Cleve said, that is about the size of it. The plumb bob hung in that barn for 41 years. It was still hanging there when Della Bly's own grandchildren were old enough to be told what it was for, and the way she told it, which was the way it got told in that basin for 3 generations, was that a woman had come out from Iowa on a stage in the fall of 1887 to marry one brother and had married the other one, and that she had never once in her life raised her voice. She had only ever said the same thing. Hang it, and wait, and look at where the line falls, and then believe the line and not yourself.